OK, let's have a look at the United States, where another Republican has entered the race for the party's presidential nomination. Tim Scott from South Carolina is the only African-American Republican in the Senate, and he's promised to be just as tough on illegal migrants as Donald Trump.
I will build the wall, and I will allow the world's greatest military to fight these terrorists, because that's exactly what they are.
But all eyes are on anti-woke warrior Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, who's expected to declare his hand this week. That's where I started with Kristin Tate in Houston.
Yes, so Ron DeSantis has been traveling to all of the typical primary states like New Hampshire and Iowa, and he is expected to announce his presidential campaign this week. So we're all waiting for that. Right now, Ron DeSantis is down in the polls a little bit compared to Trump when you look at primary polling, but that's mostly because the criminal case brought against Trump in New York really rallied Trump's voters around him. But this primary is not over yet, Chris, not even close. We have a long way to go. DeSantis is a very competitive candidate. And look, I mean, his best pitch is that he's the guy who could beat Joe Biden, because in 2020, Donald Trump lost to a doddering dementia patient who never left his basement. And he has to prove to voters that he can actually win this time. Whereas Ron DeSantis, he has a great track record in Florida that he can point to. And his pitch is really going to be that quiet success and focus on policy is going to be a better way to run the country than this sort of loud grandstanding on social media that Trump engages in all the time.
Absolutely. He's such a compelling figure, is Ron DeSantis, but even people who like him and would like to see him president one time are a bit worried about him running against Trump, because they're worried that he'll flame out against Trump and the Republicans will be divided. I guess we'll find out soon. But one of the things about DeSantis is, the way he managed Florida through the pandemic. He really showed the way in a more free, less intrusive way to get through the pandemic. But also he takes on these culture issues. We talk about them as being culture wars, but most voters, I think, just see them as someone standing up for common sense. And he's focusing on one of those at the moment, where he's saying public buildings in Florida will actually have to have toilets for boys and girls and separate toilets for men and women. Have a look. Here's Ron DeSantis.
Public buildings with a restroom, locker room, or changing facility, that they must have separate facilities for men and women based on biological sex. A woman should not be in a locker room having to worry about someone from the opposite sex being in their locker room.
Kristin, this stuff just makes so much sense to most people. Leftists go spare about it. It would be great to see him run this sort of stuff on the national stage.
Yes, and it's insane that we've gotten to the point in our society where just saying that there should be boys' restrooms and girls' restrooms, that saying that is considered courageous. But here we are. But yes, this is the most recent sort of fight that Ron DeSantis is taking on. And he has been really quietly just racking up wins. I mean, look at what he did, as you mentioned, during COVID. Florida was one of the few states to actually stay open, keep their kids in school for the vast majority of the pandemic. The business community did much better there than in these other lockdown states. And he's even, made these really great symbolic gestures as well, sort of alluding to what he would be like as a president. Remember when he shipped those migrants up to Martha's Vineyard to send a message to Washington, D.C. about the open border? And look, this has paid off for him with voters in Florida, and his reelection was one of the few bright spots, if not the only bright spot, in the 2022 midterms, which were a disaster for Republicans, except for Ron DeSantis, who had this blowout victory.